bells ringing, diamonds blinging, carols singing.
Hi friends, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to share with you a list of books that I DNF'd this year. I do this purely for fun. I always talk about DNFing books and people always wonder why and how and when I DNF books. So I'm here to share a little bit of that information with you today. I also want to let you know that while I am sharing all of the books that I DNF'd, I am also doing an episode for my patrons of all the books I should have DNF'd. Actually, I'm only sharing 15 of the ones that I should have. I'm sure there's more, but I'm sharing that over on Patreon. The link to join my Patreon is in the description box as always. So I have a list of 17 books that I have DNF'd so far this year. Let's go ahead and kick things off with one of my favorite authors, a book in one of my favorite series of all time, and that is Postmortem by Patricia Cornwell. So Beth from Best Sold Booked, but she changed her name recently. I'll have her channel linked down below, but she has a book club and she decided to read Postmortem. It is the first book in the 𝒂𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒂𝒔 series, and I am collecting that series and I love that author, and I've read this book a long time ago. But picking it up recently, I realized like how dated it was and how slow it was. And I do want to return to this and I do want to read it. I just have to realize it's a lot slower than like her newer stuff. And it's a lot more dated than her newer stuff because the author, Patricia Cornwell, actually works in the forensic field and works with people who are in the forensic field. And the technology that was available when she started writing opposed to now is very, very different. But I love seeing the arc of the whole series, but this first book, it's not great, guys. It's not great, but you get to know the characters that start the whole series, and I really just want those nostalgic feelings for that. So I am going to return to this at some point, but my first DNF, Postmortem by Patricia Cornwell. I have a shelf on Goodreads where I keep track of all of my DNFs. So I do sometimes write little notes or what page I DNF'd them on and all of that. So let's pick up with Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I've read one other book by Sally Rooney, Normal People, and I rated it 1 star. I did not like it at all. I know a lot of people love that book, so don't come for me. It's just not the author for me. It's her writing, it's her lack of quotation marks, it's her lack of plot. She's a very character-driven author, and some people love that. I'm not a super fan of that. So I ended up DNFing that pretty early on. Let's see what I said on Goodreads. I said, lack of quotation marks is annoying, but it's the dull writing and lack of plot that kills it for me. DNF on page 17. So some would say I didn't even give that book a chance, but when I recognized things immediately from Normal People, I was like, I'm not sludging through another book. Next up is the final revival of Opal and Nev, which was on my list of 22 books to read in 2022. And I was super excited. This was one of my most anticipated books of 2021. And I didn't get around to it until this year. And I DNF'd on page 90. I said, I love the full cast of the audiobook, but the pacing is super slow and nothing is happening. I'm bored and almost 100 pages in. So yeah, again, the writing, it being more character driven than plot driven, and again with the writing. Next up, The Three Mrs. Greys by Shelley Ellis. DNF'd this back in April. Let's see what I said about this one. I said, oh wow, I'm very disappointed about this, but I'm gonna DNF this on page 145. I listened to this on a long walk this afternoon, and while I can say it was entertaining, I didn't feel like the plot was going anywhere. Imagine my surprise to find out that this is the first book in a series and this book offers no real answers by the end. Yeah, that's a hard pass for me. Could I finish the audiobook? Probably, but I'd rather be reading something I'm going to enjoy a bit more than throwing another low rating on a book by a marginalized author just for the sake of finishing. So yeah, I heard that the mystery you're trying to solve or whatever in the first book doesn't even get solved. So I was like, no, we're not fans of stories like that over here. So next up, The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. The main reason I DNF'd this is because I got spoiled for the big reveal. I was watching a YouTube video. They spoiled it, plain as day. And even friends that love this book said, well, what did you get spoiled for? And I told them, and they were like, oh, wow, you got spoiled. So I was like, yeah. So I thought, okay, now that I know that, will I still enjoy the story? Unfortunately, no. So DNF on page 175. I didn't feel like the book was telling one story. I felt like short stories or vignettes. Needless to say, see what I did there? I didn't care what happened, so I will happily return this one to the library and try Sundial instead, which I did. The next book I DNF'd is The Jigsaw Man by Nadine Matheson. This is the first book in the Inspector Angelica Henley series, and this is about a serial killer, or supposed serial killer. And I was really interested, but it was very, very long. It's 496 pages, and I just, slow, boring, I can't keep the character straight, and the audiobook did not help. I DNF'd on page 55. Next up, I DNF'd not one, but two books by Stephen Rowley. So I DNF'd The Editor, and then later I DNF'd The Guncle. So for The Editor, I actually picked that one up first since it was published first. And I said, not feeling well, so looking for something I can fly through right now, and this is not it. DNF at page 37, and if I don't know if I'll return to it, or not, because I'm bored with the constant flailing about Jackie O. Like, I get it, she's an icon, let's move on. And then I was like, okay, maybe it's just that particular book that I'm not in the mood for, and I tried The Guncle, which is so highly rated. Like, when I'm talking about highly rating, I'm talking it has 81,000 ratings and a 4.17. Like, everybody loves this book. And it was one of my most highly anticipated books of 2021. But when I finally got around to reading it this year, I said I wanted to love it. It was a 5-star prediction. Maybe I'm just not in the mood for it, or maybe it's just Stephen Rowley's writing. He has this humorous writing style where I feel like every word, every sentence is a joke, and I'm supposed to be going, but I don't, and I don't like his humor or his writing style. So I DNF'd this on page 34 and have written off this author. So I will not be returning to either of those. Next, Mary Kay Andrews. I DNF'd Hello Summer. I feel like I read a good portion of this. Yes, DNF on page 288 of Hello Summer by Mary Kay Andrews, which is 58% of the story. I'm not hating it, but it's definitely a slow-paced story that doesn't need to be 470 pages. I mean, in my opinion, that's just ridiculous for the story that was trying to be told. Anyways, I'd probably end up rating it a 3 stars, and that's just not worth my time and the effort I'd spend slogging through it. So yeah, so I DNF'd that one. I have read and loved some Mary Kay Andrews books. I do think some of her stories are a little long, a little too detailed, a little too descriptive, and they don't need to be. But yeah, DNF'd that one. Let's see. Next up, I was going to do an author taste test of Emma Straub. I think Straub. I'm not sure how you say it, but so I started with The Vacationers. Did not like the writing at all. Loved the cover though. I DNF'd this one 28% in on page 81. It was a short book, so I could push myself through it, but I didn't like the writing and the plot wasn't going anywhere. I would like more of the gay fathers adopting storyline, but like, let me just find a book about that and read that instead. So it wasn't focusing on the things that I wanted it to focus on, and I was like, why don't I just find books that focus on the parts that I do love? Okay, so next up is a couple of cozy mysteries. The first one I DNF'd is Pint of No Return by Dana Mentink. This is the first book in the Shake Shop mystery series. Love this cover so much. I was so excited about this. I always hear great things about this, but I DNF'd it on page 64. I wasn't being pulled into the story how I wanted to be. The character, setting, and plot were all just meh. And that's great because that means that's a series that I don't have to keep up with. Again, that was Pint of No Return. And then the next one is another like super beloved series, Dial A for Aunties by Jesse Q. Satano. DNF'd that pretty early on as well. Let's see, page 86, start of chapter 10. I had been reading that book for days and days, and I just wasn't making progress, and there was nothing compelling me to pick up the book and continue reading it. So I said, everyone kept telling me how humorous it was, and I just wasn't getting those vibes. I wasn't invested in the dead person or what happened to them or Meddy's past relationship with Nathan. And when you don't care about anything, it's time to just move on. So I felt good about getting rid of those. Next up was this weird book I found on Grindhouse's publishing website, and it's The Fetishists by A.S. Comer. And I read way too much for comfort. It's only 176 pages, and I don't know how much I read. I didn't write anything on this, but let me just say, I know things now that I never wanted to know. I'm in the middle of editing the books that I DNF'd this year, and for some reason my footage is corrupt. I got the majority of the footage, but somewhere in the middle of the file it's no audio and I'm just frozen there. So I don't know what happened. So I have 4 more DNFs to talk to you about, starting with Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. I DNF'd this on page 109. Nothing was happening. I didn't care about the characters, which it was a character-driven novel. The little bit of plot that we got, I didn't care about that. It was marketed as magical realism, and I typically don't like that, but I wanted to take a chance on it because the synopsis sounded good. But like, why waste my time on a book I wasn't enjoying? And I did hear that the ending kind of makes the whole book, but I'm not a believer in that. Like, it has to be good throughout. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not just reading a book for the ending. Otherwise, just give me the last chapter. Okay, next up, another really popular book that I DNF'd, True Biz by Sarah Novak. This book has 29,000 ratings and a 4.14 rating. So this is a me thing because I DNF'd it on page 52. It's a slice of life story about deaf characters and deaf culture, and I studied American Sign Language in college for 5 years. So I was immersed into that world, immersed in that culture, immersed into that language. And I don't think that I would have gained anything from this story. I said, True Biz is a great book about ASL and deaf culture, but as someone who was intensely immersed in that world for 5 years, it wasn't anything new to me. All the stories and anecdotes were things I've all seen, read, or heard before multiple times. Plus, it was more of a slice of life story, and as you know, I prefer plot-driven stories. So that was why I DNF'd True Biz. I have 1 more cozy mystery and 1 romance. I DNF'd in Peppermint Peril because, again, the writing. So In Peppermint Peril is the first book in the A.T.N. Red mystery. This is by Joy Avon. I DNF'd it on page 57. I could have pushed through. Cozy mysteries go really fast, but I just wasn't enjoying it. So why push myself through it? Why expend that extra time and energy? I didn't like the writing or the characters or the mystery, and when you just don't care, it's time to move on. All right, so picked up A Merry Little Meet Cute by Julie Murphy and Sierra Simone, and I really wanted to enjoy this one, smut and all. I like the plus size representation and the positivity it brings to the adult film industry, but at the same time, it was so unrealistic, and there was just so much smut. I mean, more like smut adjacent because I DNF'd it on page 71, but I could just tell it was going there. I know the main character was an adult film star, but I was expecting once she got on the set, things would kind of like clean up a little bit. No, it did not. So I was not into that at all. And that was the last book that I DNF'd this year. So those are my DNFs. Now, back to the video. So like I said, I do have a shelf where I house all of my DNFs, so I will link my Goodreads down below. Actually, it's always linked down below. So if you're interested in more of my thoughts on some of these DNFs, definitely check out my Goodreads. But yeah, those are the 17 books that I DNF'd this year. I think what I have come to learn about myself, and maybe you have come to learn about me through this video, is I really do prefer books that have a really strong plot over characters. I like strong characters too, but I like there at least to be a really good plot. Writing is a big thing for me. I don't like overly written, flowery, you know, that type of writing. I like very straightforward, tell me the story type writing. And I also don't like long books. So those are a couple of things about me. As you can see, I DNF'd on page 17. I DNF'd on page 235. It really doesn't matter when I DNF it. It's just the fact of like, I don't feel like moving on in this book anymore, so I'm not going to do it. So those are the 17 books that I DNF'd this year. Let me know down in the comment section down below if you DNF books and which books you have DNF'd this year. I would actually really like to know. Like I said, not trying to bash on any of these books. While they didn't work for me, they can definitely work for you. In fact, my friend Lane and I have such different tastes. We literally, like, I will love a book, she will hate it. She will love, I will hate. Like, our tastes are just so opposite of each other, and that's okay. And I love that about our friendship. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you're all having a lovely day or night, and I'll see you guys again in another video very soon. Bye, friends.
Sleigh bells ringing, diamonds blinging.